how we sum it up is to say, follow Jesus. That's the great commandment, is follow Jesus. We've got Matthew 22, 34 to the end on Sunday, which contains Jesus identifying the two great commandments. So what are your thoughts?
So this begins with the Pharisees realising that Jesus has just slam dunked the Sadducees. So they're going to have a go and see if they can't undermine his authority by their cleverness with asking him some questions. Hence, that's the background to it. And the question therefore comes, what's the most important commandment? And as we know, famously, Jesus says to love God and to love your neighbour as yourself. And I suppose I immediately am drawn, as you know very often, to the words of Stanley Hauerwas, who talks about how sentimentality is one of the great dangers to the gospel in the present day. And the reason he says that is because he thinks we have a very sentimental view as Christians of love and of God's love. In other words, God is here to kind of like basically build us up, to heal us, to enable our flourishing, to give us our desires, to answer our needs. And while some of that is true, the danger is it becomes very much us at the centre, and it's all about meeting our needs in a very kind of 21st century Maslow's hierarchy of needs sort of way. But he says, if Jesus was really preaching a message like that, then how did he possibly get crucified? And it's clear that actually when Jesus talks about love, he's talking about a very specific and chastening kind of love. One of the things that we don't notice about when Jesus talks about the two great commandments is he says, on this hangs all the law and the prophets. Now you can debate what hangs means, but in other words, the law and the prophets are not irrelevant to this love. What did the God of the Old Testament send his people to show he loved them? Not chocolates and flowers, but the law and the prophets to enable them to be all they were called to be by God. And what we're seeing here with Jesus, you see it in the Sermon on the Mount, is the fulfillment of the law. So when Jesus comes with a message of love, it's a message of love to build us up to all we're called to be in God. So that challenges the religious leaders to be no longer to be hypocrites. It challenges those who are lying to no longer lie. It challenges the rich young man to no longer worship money and the such like, which of course in some ways is highly offensive. So Hauerwas says, this is the kind of love that you could imagine would get you crucified.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of where I was. Where were you with it?
Well, I was struck, I guess I was thinking along your lines, and then read something that just raised, not a question, but kind of put this in a different context. So, as you say, we've got Jesus is responding to the Pharisee who is, wanting to put him on the spot, put Jesus on the spot. And at that time, which was the greatest commandment, was an area of contention. There are 613 commandments. And some of the rabbis were saying they're all equal, and others were saying, well, actually, we need to have some sort of gradation. So let's ask this person what he thinks. We'll put him on the spot. And Jesus, of course, answers with the first of all the Deuteronomy 6, the Shema, and adds to that this commandment from Leviticus about loving your neighbour. So he's put those two together. Then, as you say, he says on everything, on all the law and the prophets, the law and the prophets hang on this. So there's a sense in which, looking at those two commandments held together, you can then extrapolate everything else from the law and commandments from it. But he's talking within the frame of the Hebrew scriptures, of his own scriptures, and within the frame of the Pharisees' comprehension. So this would, whether the Pharisee agreed with it or not, it would make sense to the Pharisee. He would understand the line of argument. What I was reading earlier was saying, but actually, think back to the rich young ruler. So rich young ruler comes in 5 chapters or whatever it is, in 19, I think, in Matthew 19. And he says, what do I need for it to have eternal life? And Jesus says, do you obey the commandments? And he says, yes, which ones? And interesting, there's a list that Jesus gives him. So he's got, there's don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't steal, honour your father and mother.
All these I have kept since my youth.
But then Jesus adds, and love your neighbour as yourself. So he takes some of the 10 Commandments, adds this one from Leviticus, and as you say, the young ruler says, I've kept all these. And Jesus then sort of looks at it and says, you need to relinquish all you have and follow me. So, in a sense, what I think we get from that is that for us, yes, the 2 great commandments are, for me personally, are an immensely central understanding of what it means to be Christian. But at the absolute heart of that, how we sum it up is to say, follow Jesus. That's the great commandment, is follow Jesus. And so that kind of just shifts the context and the perspective of Jesus' answer, helped by, for me, interplaying it with the rich young ruler.
Yeah. And to follow Jesus means then taking up all of his teachings in the Sermon on the Mount, for instance. So this love begins to take very concrete form, doesn't it?
Back to your point then. So you've then got an understanding through Jesus's interpretation of what that law actually means, and that it is a much more transformative, profound engagement of all of our being. Than simply saying, well, yes, I've done that. We cannot give the rich young ruler's answer. Yeah. We cannot say, I've obeyed all of these since I was a youth.
Yeah, no manipulative talk, loving your enemies, not lying, being careful about your anger, none of which is sentimental at all. Quite sobering stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.